Family sits inside, Meredith. Guests sit outside. That was what my sister Brielle said when I found my name on a little card taped to a folding table beside the coat racks, the restroom doors, and two silver trash bins covered with black plastic. The ballroom was glowing behind glass, full of roses, candles, champagne, and old money laughter. I could hear the string quartet playing softly for her entrance. I could see my mother fixing Brielle's veil like she was placing a crown on a queen. My father saw me standing there in my navy dress with the gift box in my hands, and he looked away so fast it felt practiced. I was 58 years old, too old to beg for a chair, too tired to ask people why they hated me quietly, and too healed to cry in public. So I placed my purse on the folding chair, looked at the empty hallway table, and smiled the way women smile when they finally understand the lesson. If you have ever been treated like you were useful in private but shameful in public, then stay with me. Because what happened after I walked out of that wedding did not just ruin my sister's perfect day. It exposed the lie my family had lived on for 30 years. The wedding was at a restored manor in Newport, Rhode Island, one of those places with white pillars, polished floors, and windows tall enough to make regular people feel small. Brielle had chosen it because her new husband, Graham Whitlock, owned half the waterfront properties in town, and she wanted everyone to know she had married up. She was 54, but she still acted like the youngest girl in the room, soft voice, perfect curls, trembling hands whenever a man with money was watching. I was the older sister, the one who drove our parents to appointments, paid the overdue taxes on their house, handled my father's hospital bills, and quietly sent Brielle money whenever she called crying about another failed business idea. But in family photos, I was always asked to stand on the edge. In conversations, I was corrected. At holidays, I was told not to make Brielle feel bad by mentioning my work, my savings, my home, or anything I had built without help. My mother, Eloise, used to say, "Meredith, you are strong. Brielle is sensitive." What she meant was, "You can bleed quietly, but she must never be uncomfortable." That sentence raised me more than either of my parents ever did. I drove 4 hours to that wedding because my father called the night before and said, "Please come. Your mother wants peace." Peace was always the word they used when they wanted me to accept disrespect without naming it. I bought Brielle a silver keepsake box because I still had a foolish piece of love left in me, the kind older sisters keep even after the younger one has used them like a ladder. Inside the box, I placed a lace handkerchief that had belonged to our grandmother and a small envelope. But the envelope was not sentimental. It held copies of bank transfers, signed statements, and one printed email that Brielle never knew I had. For 2 months, I had been receiving calls from a woman named June Holloway, Graham's longtime bookkeeper. June was 71, sharp as a sewing needle, and loyal to truth more than money. She told me Brielle had been pushing Graham to sign over a beach house before the wedding, asking about his life insurance, and bragging that once she became Mrs. Whitlock, the old man and his daughter would be easy to move aside. Graham was not old. He was 63, kind, recently widowed, and lonely enough to mistake Brielle's performance for love. June had screenshots. I had copies. And Brielle, foolish as always, had underestimated the quiet sister. The planner came over with a clipboard and a nervous smile. "Mrs. Keene, I'm so sorry, but your assigned seating is right here." Right here meant the hallway, half hidden behind a potted palm, where servers pushed carts and guests came out to check their phones. I asked if there had been a mistake. Before the planner could answer, Brielle appeared in her white satin gown, diamonds at her throat, satisfaction in her eyes. "No mistake," she said softly. "We had limited family seating." I looked through the glass. There were 3 empty chairs beside my parents. One even had a little card with the word reserved. Brielle followed my eyes and smiled. "Those are for people who count." My mother stepped into the hallway just then, heard every word and pretended to adjust her bracelet. My father stared at the floor. That silence hurt more than Brielle's voice. A stranger can insult you and walk away. But family can insult you and expect you to help clean up afterward. I held that silver box in both hands, feeling the sharp corners press into my palms, and something inside me finally stopped begging. I did not yell. I did not ask why. Women like me learn early that if we raise our voice, people discuss our tone instead of their cruelty. I simply said, Brielle, one day you will humiliate the wrong person in front of the right witnesses. She laughed, but I saw her eyes flick toward the planner, then toward my mother. She knew. My mother whispered, Meredith, don't start. I turned to her and said, I didn't start anything. I'm just done finishing it for you. Then I picked up my purse, carried the silver box back to the gift table near the ballroom doors, and placed it on top of the largest pile where the photographer would not miss it. I made sure the card faced upward. To Brielle and Graham, with the truth you both deserve. Then I walked out of the manor and into the cold, salt air. If you are listening to this, and you have spent years waiting for people to choose you, remember this. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop standing in rooms where they keep proving they never will. I had barely reached the parking lot when the doors behind me opened and the first applause began. The wedding speeches were starting. I sat in my car, engine off, hands steady on the wheel, looking at the warm windows. Inside, Brielle was probably glowing under the chandelier, pretending she had always been loved correctly. Graham's daughter, Meredith, had flown in from Seattle for the wedding. She was 40, quiet, careful, and protective of her father in a way I respected immediately. She had called me once after June gave her my number. I don't want to believe this, she told me, but I need to know before he loses everything my mother built with him. That was when I mailed her copies, too. That was the new piece Brielle never saw coming. The silver box was not the only proof in that room. Maris had the full folder in her bag, and Graham's family attorney, Walter Pike, was seated at table 4 with his reading glasses in his breast pocket. Brielle thought she had placed me in the hallway like garbage. She did not realize she had placed herself in the center of a room full of witnesses. The scream came 12 minutes later. It cut through the glass, sharp enough that a valet turned his head. First came the silence, then a woman shouting, then the heavy sound of a microphone dropping. Later, Maris told me exactly what happened. During the toast, Brielle reached for the silver box because the photographer wanted a sweet gift-opening moment. She smiled for the camera, lifted the lid, and pulled out the lace handkerchief first. "Oh, how thoughtful," my mother said, loud enough for people nearby to hear. Then the envelope slipped out. Graham opened it because his name was on the top page. His smile faded before he finished the first paragraph. Brielle tried to grab it, but Maris stood up and said, "Dad, read it out loud." Brielle snapped, "This is private." And Graham, calm for the first time all day, said, "So is my bank account." The room went still. The printed email was from Brielle to a real estate consultant, asking how long after marriage she would need to wait before pushing her husband to transfer the Atlantic Avenue beach house into her name. The next page had texts where she called Graham sweet but easy, mocked his late wife's furniture, and said his daughter would be handled after the honeymoon. My mother gasped like she was the victim. My father stood up but did not move. Brielle's face changed in pieces, first confusion, then rage, then that old little girl panic she used whenever consequences entered the room. "Meredith did this," she cried. "She has always been jealous of me." Maris walked to the front of the room and placed her own folder beside the silver box. "No," she said. "June Holloway did this. The bank records did this. Your emails did this. Meredith only made sure my father saw it before you got his house." That was when Graham removed his wedding ring. Not dramatically, not angrily, just slowly, like a man waking from anesthesia. Brielle grabbed his sleeve, begging now, whispering that people were watching. He looked around the ballroom and said, "Good. They should." Then Walter Pike, the attorney, stood and announced that the property transfer documents Brielle had been pushing Graham to sign were void. The new beneficiary forms were canceled that morning, and the prenuptial agreement she had mocked in private would now be the only thing protecting him. The older guests whispered, the younger ones recorded. And my sister, who had spent her life making me feel invisible, became visible in the ugliest way possible. Brielle turned to my parents for rescue, like she always had. "Mom, tell them she's lying." My mother opened her mouth, but nothing came out. My father's face had gone gray. He looked at the hallway through the glass, at the place where they had seated me beside the trash cans, and for the first time in my life, shame found him before anger did. "Brielle," he said, voice shaking, "what did you do?" She screamed that I had poisoned everyone, that I had ruined her happiness, that I was bitter because nobody had ever chosen me. Then Meredith said the sentence that ended it. "Your sister chose you for 58 years. You just never counted it because it was free." The room broke after that. Graham walked out. His attorney followed. Meredith followed. Guests started leaving in small, embarrassed groups, carrying their coats, avoiding my mother's eyes. The quartet packed their instruments. The photographer stopped taking pictures. Brielle stood under $10,000 worth of flowers, while her perfect wedding collapsed around her like wet paper. My phone began buzzing before I even started the car. Mother. Father. Unknown number. Mother again. A text arrived from Eloise. "Please come back. We need to talk as a family." I almost laughed. As a family. They always remembered that word when there was damage to control. I looked once more at the manor, at the glowing windows and the shadows moving inside, and I thought about every birthday dinner where Brielle blew out candles on cakes I paid for. Every hospital hallway where I sat alone while my parents praised her for sending flowers. Every Christmas morning when I cooked, cleaned, wrapped, smiled, and still somehow became the difficult one. Then I put the phone face down. No reply. No explanation. No soft place for them to land. Some people do not want peace. They want access to the person they harmed, so they can ask that person to make the room comfortable again. I drove home before sunrise, across dark bridges and empty highways, with the ocean wind still in my hair and my sister's scream fading behind me. I did not feel victorious. Revenge in real life does not feel like fireworks. It feels like finally putting down a heavy bag you carried so long you forgot it was hurting you. By noon, Meredith sent one message. "Thank you for saving my father." My father sent one too, hours later. "I should have saved you more." I read it twice, then deleted it. Not because it meant nothing, but because it came 30 years late. Brielle posted nothing. The wedding photos never appeared. The manor refunded nothing. And the hallway table beside the trash cans became the most expensive seat in the whole building, because from there, I learned exactly what I was worth. Not to them, to myself. 3 weeks later, I rented a small cottage in Maine and spent 7 days listening to waves instead of apologies. I bought myself flowers. I ate dinner by the window. I wore the navy dress again to a little restaurant where nobody knew my name and nobody treated me like an extra in someone else's life. My mother kept calling. My father sent letters. Brielle sent one message. "You destroyed my life." I answered only once. "No, Brielle." I returned it to you. Then I blocked her. And if you have ever been seated outside the room, blamed for the cold and expected to be grateful for crumbs, hear me clearly. You do not need to scream to be powerful. You do not need a crowd to prove your pain. Sometimes all you need is the truth. One clean exit and enough self-respect to let the people who erased you watch the lights go out without you. Commentary, discussion, explanation, and lessons. Before we move away from this story, let's stop for a moment and look at what really happened here. Because this was not only a story about a wedding, it was not only about one sister being seated in a hallway. This was about years of quiet disrespect, years of being treated like the strong one, and years of being expected to smile while other people took your place, your love, your time, and your dignity. Meredith did not suddenly become angry at the wedding. That pain had been building for a long time. The hallway seat was only the final insult. Sometimes, one small moment opens the door to a lifetime of truth. What makes this story powerful is that Meredith did not fight in the way people expected. She did not scream. She did not throw a scene. She did not beg her parents to defend her. She simply watched, understood, and walked away. And that silence was not weakness, it was control. Many people mistake quiet people for helpless people. They think if someone does not argue, then that person has accepted the insult. But in this story, Meredith's silence became her strongest weapon. She knew the truth. She had proof. And she understood that when truth is strong enough, it does not need noise. The wedding itself was supposed to be Brielle's perfect stage. The beautiful manor, the flowers, the music, the expensive dress, the rich husband, the proud family. Everything was arranged to make her look flawless. But that is the danger of building your life on appearance. If your image is fake, then one honest document can destroy the whole performance. Brielle wanted everyone to see her as soft, romantic, and innocent. But behind closed doors, she was planning money moves, property control, and emotional manipulation. She did not love Graham in a clean way. She loved what his name, his house, and his bank account could give her. Now let's talk about the parents, because their role matters a lot. Meredith's mother and father did not create the wedding scandal, but they helped create the family pattern. For years, they protected Brielle from consequences and expected Meredith to carry the emotional weight. They called Meredith strong, but they used that word as an excuse to ignore her pain. This happens in many families. One child gets attention because they are dramatic, sensitive, or demanding. Another child becomes responsible, quiet, and useful. And slowly, the family starts treating that responsible child like they do not need love. But being strong does not mean you do not get hurt. Being independent does not mean you do not deserve care. The hallway scene is important because it shows the whole family truth in one image. Brielle was inside the ballroom under the lights. Meredith was outside near the trash cans. That was not just seating. That was a message. It said, "You are not important enough to be seen." But the beautiful twist is that the hallway became the place where Meredith finally saw herself clearly. She realized she did not need to fight for a seat at a table where people had already decided her value. That is a deep lesson. Not every table is worth sitting at. Not every invitation is respect. And sometimes leaving is not losing. Sometimes leaving is the first time you choose yourself. The revenge in this story feels satisfying because it is not messy revenge. It is not childish revenge. It is truth-based revenge. Meredith did not invent lies about Brielle. She did not fake anything. She simply allowed real proof to reach the right people at the right time. That is why Brielle had no real defense. She could scream, blame, cry, and accuse, but the documents were stronger than her performance. This is something we can learn from. When people hurt you, do not always rush to react. Watch carefully. Save the facts. Protect yourself. Because emotions can be dismissed, but proof is harder to bury. Another important part is Graham and Mary's. Graham was not a bad man. He was lonely and trusting. Brielle saw that weakness and tried to use it. Maris, his daughter, represents the person who asks hard questions before it is too late. In real life, many people are fooled because they want to believe in love, family, or loyalty. But love should not make you blind. If someone is pushing too fast for money, property, papers, or control, that is not romance. That is a warning sign. This story reminds us that kindness is beautiful, but kindness without boundaries can become dangerous. And then we see Meredith's final choice. She does not stay to enjoy Brielle's fall. She does not run back inside to say, "I told you so." She drives away. That part is very important. True healing is not always about watching someone suffer. Sometimes the real victory is when their power over your heart finally ends. Meredith did not need applause. She needed freedom. She needed peace. And by leaving, she proved that the revenge was not just against Brielle. It was also against the old version of herself, the woman who kept waiting to be chosen. So what do we learn from this story? First, never confuse silence with weakness. Some people are quiet because they are afraid, but some people are quiet because they are done explaining themselves. Second, family should not be a place where one person is always sacrificed for another person's comfort. Love should not require you to disappear. Third, truth has timing. If you use it with patience, it can do more than anger ever could. And finally, self-respect sometimes begins with one simple act: walking out of a room where people keep treating you like you do not count. This story is painful, but it is also empowering. Meredith lost a seat at a wedding, but she gained something much bigger. She gained the courage to stop begging for respect from people who had already shown her who they were, and maybe that is the strongest message here. When people place you beside the trash, do not forget your worth. You do not have to prove your value to people committed to misunderstanding you. Sometimes, you just take your truth, take your dignity, and leave them alone with the consequences.